most people demand meaning in real time. And that is why they often tend to suffer not just once, but twice. Now, you see, we tend to have a lot of expectations when it comes to life. We think that when we go through suffering, periods of uncertainty, suffering, lack of satisfaction, that we might just be great or wonderful if we are able to get the solution instantaneously and life would be great. And with that fantasy in your mind, without adding any context or meaning behind your suffering, you start a new cycle of suffering that is basically a self fulfilling prophecy of doom and destruction. And this is why it is important for us to have stories that can make sense when we look at it backwards and not just forwards, or not just in the present moment. And this is where it would kind of contradict the spiritual teaching of being in the present moment, because it's easy to tell you that, hey, stop suffering, enjoy the present moment, be in the now. But that's not helpful for us many times because it prevents us from seeing on where exactly we are heading, on where exactly the journey is unfolding, where exactly that we are directing ourselves to take the next step. I'm not saying that present moment is not beneficial. It is indeed beneficial, but at the same time, it is important to have a sense of meaning, a context where you can see where you're headed and where you can see why you had the past, or why is it that the suffering that you're going through is bad in the first place. There is a famous Steve Jobs quote that goes something like, you cannot connect the dots going forwards or looking at the present, but you have to connect the dots looking backwards. It's going to be helpful. Why is that the case? Because when we are going through suffering ourselves, you are able to look back your past, not to be stuck in the past, but you look back into the past and see, oh, I made that choice back then. This is why I took the step that I'm taking right now, and hence why I'm suffering because of the change that I'm undergoing, which is uncertain, but there is a strong why to why I'm undergoing that change, why I have taken this choice, and where I'm heading forwards in my life. That would be helpful. For example, in my current circumstance of life, I have a vision of doing workshops, retreats, and seminars on breathwork, meditation, psychedelics, spirituality, and religion. It's a controversial take, although there are some people who are doing it out there. Legally and societally speaking, not everyone is going to be on board with it. And there is a confusion in my mind and heart that, oh, the path that I'm taking is unconventional. Is it going to be accepted by society? Is there a solid path that I can take that'll help me get to my vision? So I was thinking maybe I should do mental health counseling. Maybe I should do PhD in psychology. But I look at the curriculum and I recognize that even though they do touch upon the mental health aspect and helping someone by equipping me with skill sets, it still leaves out concepts like consciousness, concepts like psychedelics, concepts like Carl Jung or shadow work, or some deep stuff that I like to talk about. So rather than getting caught up in the existential loop there, I've decided that, oh, I am going to do a YouTube channel where I get to talk about these things. And if I'm able to build an audience, great. If I'm not, it's okay. I would still be able to continue being persistent in the idea or the fantasy of my narrative, my story, my why behind where I was coming from back in my past, why I've chosen to do these videos, and where am I heading given the direction or the methodology that I have for myself in this journey. And that's exactly how this video can be helpful for you. By the end of this video, I hope that you're able to have a simple exercise that I'll be sharing, which will help you map out how you can bring more meaning to your life in case you're feeling meaningless at this point of time. And that's also through which you'll recognize the significance of having a story or a why or a myth behind your life purpose, behind your day to day activities. So, the core idea that is to see life as a story or a personal myth. I'm sure you've watched many movies, many TV shows. Why are you gravitated towards movies and TV shows? It's because they have a story. There is a bad guy. There is a circumstance that the hero has to go through. He has to overcome those circumstances and be strong enough to face the bad guy and ultimately win. Now, this is not exactly how all TV shows and movies are, but the reason why we are captivated is because we see some parts of ourselves in that hero or in that villain or whatever the case is that can resonate with you and give you some purpose and meaning when you're watching that movie or a TV show. In that same way, if you are able to equip a perspective of having a mythological view of your life, then you're not just living events, you are living a narrative arc. You are living a story that you have built for yourself that would inspire you to propel forward, just like when you are excited to binge watch on a movie series or a TV show. This is where I would bring up Carl Jung's personal myth. Now, human beings don't live by facts alone. We like to live by meaning. We like to add some juice or zest in life. You just don't want to say it's all facts and facts don't care about your feelings, bro. That doesn't work that way. We need some zest. That's why we tend to gravitate towards random YouTube videos or brain rot content because we're looking for that dopamine hit. And what is that dopamine hit? That excitement, that feeling of going on. I'm not living a bored life. And we get confused by getting ourselves addicted to the technological aspects rather than bringing that zest and juice into a meaningful story in our own lives. So once again, you and I live by meaning, and it's not only through facts, and this meaning can come through symbols, stories, and patterns. That could be religion, that could be society, that could be the books you read, that could be the movies you watch. All of these things give us some meaning and hope to propel forward so that we are not bored, right? So in personal myth, it's like your inner story for your psyche that you are trying to live out. It's not a lie. It's not something that you call fake, because ultimately, what is fake or what is real? It's up to your own interpretation. Now, of course, if you are hanging out with a friend that you know for the past 5 years and you decide to create a significant change in your life and adopt a new value system and a new outlook on your life, more often the case is that your friend is going to call you fake and say that you have changed. But he may not recognize that you are trying to live a better life and you have adopted a new perspective and a mindset or a new myth for your narrative, which is what you're trying to use and improvise. So it's not really a lie if it's stemming from a positive intention of wanting to grow. So keep that in mind. So essentially, you are trying to have a meaning map, right? You're trying to see what your soul is drawn to. You're trying to see what keeps repeating in your life. What are the patterns? You're trying to see what you fear, what you avoid. You're trying to see what shaped you into who you are today. What books you consumed, who were the friends that you've associated yourself with, what are the type of foods you eat, what type of sports you play, what type of things you do in your free time. And also, what are you meant to integrate in terms of your shadow? In future videos, I'll be talking about shadow work and things as such. So you have to connect the pieces and see what kind of transformation your life and your lifestyle is pushing you towards. And this is where personal myth is important, so that when you feel random, when you feel anxious, when you feel existential dread, and you're like, what's going on in my life? I need some meaning. When you feel hopeless, when you fall into other people's narrative, such as society, parents, or trends, when you interpret suffering as meaningless punishment instead of initiation into something meaningful, when you lose direction, and if life gets chaotic, all of this can be aligned and guided properly if you do have some narrative, some why behind your own hero's journey. And this is where I think Carl Jung would say that your unconscious will create an entire story even if you don't consciously choose it. Because we all are living through our conditioned patterns that more often the case that we don't really recognize. And if you don't consciously shape it, it will show up as depression, compulsion, self-sabotaging, and repeating shitty relationship patterns, right? So, in a sense, myth here doesn't mean suppression. It doesn't mean that you're avoiding life. It means that you're creating a deep story wherein you're able to live within your alignment of values and a sense of direction, right? You're answering the question of who am I? What kind of story do I want to have? What kind of villain or a hero that I will be in the story? Why does this matter to me? What is this suffering for? Is it worth going through the suffering for the journey that I'm in? What kind of person will I become by the end of this journey? What is worth sacrificing in my life as a hero or a villain in this journey? So we all need a myth. Now, in all the cultures of myths or religion, people shared meaning. It's not like in today's day and age where you have social media, where you're looking at short stories of other people's lives and there is no context behind it. But when you look at things back in the day, they had these big books. Like, I'm not saying that Lord of the Rings existed a few years ago, but why did we like that mythology is because it's not just one reel or one short. It's a huge story that is distributed in 4 or 5 movies. In that similar way, religious texts, scriptures from all the traditions in the world had mythologies, stories that were not just 1 or 2 sentences, they were long. And in those long stories, they had a lot of meaning. They had journeys. It was like a movie or a TV show, but with more zest of the religious aspect, the faith aspect, or the God aspect, which drives a human being deeper into asking meaningful questions. Even if you're an atheist, I'm sure you would enjoy an in-depth story that propels you into doing things that you are not capable of doing, but you do so because your why and meaning for life far outweighs the suffering or the unwanted circumstances that you might go through. But this is where, again, the modern life, though, compared to the older times or the ancient time, it strips away the myth and it replaces it with productivity or consumerism or status or pleasure or endless choices without a guiding compass. There is no moral compass. There is no emphasis on value system. And this is also where we see, now, even though some might argue that there's a huge difference between East and West, I would say the East is becoming like West. So I don't really see a huge difference now. It's all becoming one not in a spiritual way, but I'm talking about culturally speaking. The West usually associates meaning through achievement, status, or becoming someone. And that's not a bad thing. That does propel you forward in positive ways. But if you are only stuck with the idea or the fascination of the ego wanting to prove itself and achieve something and take something and get somewhere in order to be happy, it is going to leave you dreadful because you're focused a lot on yourself and less about the ones you care about, or maybe less on the overall story because you may not have deeper value system and you're just going off of tangible, superficial, material goals that you have been chasing that could lead to burnout as well. That is what we are seeing in the society here today. Whereas in the East, or the dharmic traditions, that is, you have more emphasis on dharma, you have more emphasis on artha, kama, moksha. These are some Sanskrit terms that I'll dive deeper into later in future videos. There is some sense of surrender, there is some sense of service, there is a good understanding of the microcosm and the macrocosm of how you as an individual are partaking in a role for a greater upliftment of society. The collectivistic nature that the Eastern traditions tend to have is pretty significant, and they always talk about in their stories, remember who you are, tying it back to the myth, tying it back to the greater good, understanding that you are the hero, but at the same time, you are representing a nation or a culture or God or whatever the case is. I'm not saying that the West does not have this. The West did have this back in the day, but it's more prominent in the Eastern cultures even now, although Eastern cultures are slowly becoming like the West. So these days, you see, you might be anxious. You might feel like you want to numb your emotions by doom scrolling. You could be addicted to distraction. You could be a 23-year-old feeling that you're behind in life. Your friends look like they're winning. You're watching reels at 2 a.m. You're trying to heal, but you're looking at all this content and there's so much information oversaturation or overload that you feel more and more confused. And this chapter of your life never really explains the whole book because you're so saturated right now that you forgot to zoom out in a meta perspective and see where you're coming from, where your life is headed, what is your meaning, what is your value system, because you're distracted. But this is where you see meaning can't be forced moment to moment. If you are in a book, the chapter 15 explains what chapter 2 meant. What do I mean by this? If you only read chapter 15 in a book that has 30 chapters, out of the 29 chapters, you only read the 15th chapter, of course it wouldn't make sense. So in your example, if you are caught up in your stress and anxiety of this present moment and you fail to see the other chapters of your life beforehand and trying to understand what are the next upcoming chapters of your life, of course you're going to be like, where am I in life? You're going to be confused. In that same way, it is important to revisit the chapter 2 so that you get the understanding of chapter 15. But that doesn't mean you only stick to chapter 2. You also go through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 15 to make sense of what is happening in chapter 15. And that's exactly what you need to do in your life when you're stuck and uncertain, is to zoom out and look back where you're coming from so that you can create a map of where you're heading towards. Now think about it from a movie example, right? When you watch the movie Batman Begins or The Dark Knight, you see Bruce Wayne. His parents got killed in front of him. He goes through all this trauma and meaninglessness with all this money, with all the fame that he might be having. He still feels lost because he lost his loved ones, right? But later, this becomes a fuel for him to be disciplined, for him to uphold justice, and for him to have a dual identity. One as a billionaire that is talking to women, making these deals, helping the society through the financial aspects, and the other is Batman that the world doesn't see, but he still has a moral obligation, the responsibility that he carries out. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you've seen that line where Alfred asks Bruce, "Why do we fall, sir?" Right? He reminds him and asks him, "Why do you fall? Why are you failing?" It's because you're meant for something greater in your life. And from there, you add more zest, you add more meaning, you add more identity, and an unshakable why, regardless of the obstacles that you might have to go through. Just like Batman, or even Spider-Man for that matter. With great power comes great responsibility. When his Uncle Ben died, when his Uncle Ben was about to pass away, what did he exactly say? He told Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. So rather than victimizing himself, Peter Parker decided to wear that mask, wear that suit, and go help people. He didn't victimize and say, "Oh, Uncle Ben died. I'm stuck in this chapter of my life. I'm stuck in this existential crisis." No, he overcame that. But of course, if he did not have that pain, if Bruce Wayne didn't go through that pain of his parents being killed, if Spider-Man didn't go through that pain of Uncle Ben dying and things as such, they would not be such great heroes that we would look up to. So this is where I would ask you, look at yourself as a hero. Look at yourself as a great character who is going through that pain. But instead of being stuck in that pain, try to get out of that rut and have an unshakable why, so that the pain becomes a fuel factor to do something much more meaningful for yourself and the world. Now, this is where, lastly, I would bring up some good exercises that could be helpful for you to build a personal myth. And here, personal myth again doesn't mean that you are inventing a meaningless fantasy. It means that you're interpreting your life in a way that makes you braver, stronger, responsible, more alive, and like a hero. And if you like to become a villain, for sure, you could do that too. But you get the idea. It adds some meaning to it. So let's do a 3-step exercise. Number 1, choose one past pain that you might have had in your life that has been bothering you, even now, or that was bothering you previously. And ask yourself, what did it teach me? What strength did it force you to build? How can I help myself now because of it? How is this putting me in a rut that I know I can get myself out of? Right? When you ask yourself these questions, try to reframe the answer in a paragraph manner and start something like, this season that I'm in right now, I am preparing for a war or a journey. And that is because I went through this past pain previously that shaped me for who I am today. And here is why I should not be stuck in that past pain, because I'm a hero having a greater cause, wanting to do something amazing in my life. So if you're able to build this narrative by writing it down, and even if you don't want to write it down, just have a mental exercise. Close your eyes for a second and replay the audio or the part that I was talking about, those 3 steps. Or even as you were going through the entire video on my YouTube channel, try to visualize this and see how this helps you in the now and how this might bring you more meaning for the future. The benefit isn't that you're pretending that pain is good. The benefit is that you're able to build endurance and trust. You don't have to figure everything out today or in this moment. You don't have to understand why the pain is right now. Try to go back to the macrocosm or zoomed out perspective and see how this is part of the movie or a journey that you are in that will pass. It is temporary, it is not forever, but how can you utilize this to branch out to the next phase of your life? It's all about keeping it moving forward in a way, but adding more fuel as you move forward. So I hope this made sense. If you'd like to see more content like these, take a moment to subscribe, like a video, and potentially share it with someone who you think could benefit from this. And always remember, your life is being written and it's a continuous flow. Don't think that this chapter of dreadfulness or existential crisis is all of the story that you'll have. Because trust me, you have plenty more that you'll be going through, and this is just part of the phase.